Welcome to Making a Transition to a Career You Love. My name is Alexandra Stephens, and I am the Associate Director of Alumni Career Programs and Engagement at the Hiatt Career Center at Brandeis, and I want to welcome you all today. I'm very excited to introduce our presenter for today's webinar, Anna Graham-Hunter. She is a career happiness coach who helps professionals create their dream careers. She's a professional certified coach, and she's spent 23 years in a variety of careers herself, including education, journalism, politics, lobbying, nonprofit management, management consulting, and executive coaching, all before devoting herself full-time to making career happiness a reality for others. So welcome, Anna. We're so excited to have you here. And I also want to remind folks that our webinar will be recorded today. And if you have questions throughout the broadcast, please submit them through the question box in your control panel, and we'll get to as many as we can in this short hour. So Anna, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Alexandra, and thank you everyone for joining. I am very excited to be here. So right off the bat, I would like to tell you that my main goal for this webinar is for you to take action. I'm guessing that you're here because something isn't right, and of course the only way to make things right is to take action. So that's what I'm hoping that you'll do. Now, the title of this webinar is How to Make the Transition to a Career You Love, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about. But before we get to that, I want to share my assumptions about why you're here. So I'm assuming that you're here because, one, you want to do something different from what you're doing now, and two, you're not sure what to do in order to get where you want to go. So in other words, you want to find your dream career and you need help doing it. So I want to start by talking about what I mean by a dream career. My definition of a dream career is one that makes you deeply happy, and not just happy in a short-lived, I got a raise kind of way. I believe that true career happiness involves three things: day-to-day work that makes you feel both really confident and challenged, a sense that you found your people, that work is home, and enjoying the path you're on because you know that exciting things are in store for you. So if that's what you would like for your career, then you're in the right place. And in order to create career happiness for yourself, there are a few essential things you need to do. The first thing you need to do is get clear on what's going to make you happy at work so that you can answer the first question everyone is going to ask you, which is, what do you want to do? And we'll go over how to respond to this question even when you aren't sure exactly what you want to do. Then we'll talk about how you can network effectively so that you can both get a clear vision of exactly what you want to do and then go do it. And we'll talk about how to do all of this without wasting time on red herrings, such as obsessing over your resume, scouring the internet for job listings, or making awkward small talk at networking events. We'll also talk about how you can build a community of people who are genuinely committed to your success. These are the folks who are going to let you know about job openings before they're even listed. And finally, we'll talk about how you can design your career so that you never again have to feel stuck, because great opportunities will keep coming your way. Now, in order to get the most out of this, I invite you to really focus on yourself for the rest of our time together. So close down social media, put your phone on silent, and just commit to spending the next hour thinking about what you really want for your career and your life. So I'm curious if any of what I'm about to say sounds familiar. Is work an integral part of your life? In other words, does part of you just not get people who seem happy to clock in and out as long as they get a paycheck? Do you have high standards for yourself when it comes to work? And would someone else look at you and assume your career is a success? But at the same time, the work that you've invested so much in has lost its appeal, and this means that you have to drag yourself out of bed, get a sinking feeling every time you head to the office, and you leave work feeling drained and irritable. Now, of course, you'd rather be doing work that you love and enjoy, but you're either scared to make a change or you have no idea where to start. And if what I just said describes you, it's no surprise that you feel stuck, because most of the career advice out there is terrible. To listen to the supposed gurus, you should be doing any or all of the following: defining your brand, hiring a resume writer, accepting all promotions and moving up the ladder, looking for open positions and going after them, and following your passion. Now, besides the fact that this advice contradicts itself, it's useless. Worse than that, it can actually make you feel even more stuck than if you'd never listened to any of it. Because you could become so paralyzed thinking that you have to define your brand or perfect your resume before you start talking to people that you end up doing nothing. Or you feel bad for not getting super excited about the promotion on the horizon, even though you look at your own miserable boss and know you don't want her job. Or you spend tremendous amounts of time and effort applying for positions only to hear back absolutely nothing, which makes you wonder if you're invisible or if there's something wrong with you. Or you try really, really hard to find your one passion, but you get stumped because you love a lot of things, and not all of them necessarily translate into careers or careers that you would enjoy. So it's no wonder that a lot of people stay on the track they're on, counting the days until retirement. But in addition to all the failed strategies I just described, there's another darker reason people stay in professions they hate, and that is this. You feel like you were supposed to have figured out your career path years ago. And if you made the wrong choice, well, then you just have to suck it up. And I know because I felt the exact same way. But believe me, and I think you know this or you wouldn't be here, it's not worth staying on a path you hate. If you do, then it's likely two things will happen. One, you may continue to be a professional success by external standards, but every day that you go to work and fake it, a little part of you dies. And then two, you'll only be able to fake it for so long before you can't. And then your performance starts slipping, your relationship with your boss deteriorates, and before long, you and everyone around you begins to wish that you would just leave. So it is my mission to make sure that you start building a career you love before everything starts falling apart. And the solution is to make sure that your career has a solid foundation. And it's really as simple as the story of the three little pigs. We all know that story from when we were kids. The big bad wolf is going to huff and puff until he blows the house down. And there are three houses, the house made of straw, the house made of wood, and the house made of bricks. So your career, is it made out of straw or is it made out of bricks? The solution is to build it out of bricks. And that's exactly what I'm going to show you how to do. Now, even though we hear all the time about how the world is changing so fast that change is the only thing we can count on, most people and companies don't operate that way. In fact, a lot of individuals and corporations act as though we're still in the 20th century, when someone might conceivably be with the same company for their entire adult life, being taken care of and given a retirement plan they can actually retire on. Now, of course, we all know that this isn't true anymore, but the fact is many people still like to pretend that change won't happen. Instead, they wait for change to happen to them rather than being proactive in determining the course of change themselves. In other words, some people build their careers out of straw and then are surprised when they get knocked down. But what I'm going to show you in this webinar is a step-by-step process for building a career made out of bricks. A career that allows you to do what you love, to learn, grow, and change, and to call your own shots. I've seen the process I'm about to describe work over and over again, both for myself and for my clients as well. Now, I do want to mention that there's a real danger of inaction here. The world is full of people who hate their careers and talk about how they want to find something else, but the fact is, many, if not most of them, manage to stay exactly where they are for years, hating what they do the entire time. I don't want you to become one of those people, so that's why I'm going to provide you with a structure that you can act on immediately. Before we get into the nitty-gritty steps of how to build a career you love, let me tell you who I am and why you should be listening to me. First of all, I've changed professions many, many times during my 25 years in the workforce. Just to give you a quick snapshot, over the years I've worked as a battered women's advocate, middle school teacher, freelance journalist, legislative aide, campaign manager, lobbyist, operations manager, management consultant and executive coach, and now career happiness coach. As you can see, I changed careers successfully numerous times before I became a career happiness coach, which means that I know deep in my bones what works and what doesn't. And that's in fact how I got started doing this work. People looked at what I'd managed to do with my own career and wanted my help doing it for themselves. And for a while, I was doing this informally with friends and acquaintances. And then about 7 years ago, when I got certified as an executive coach, I began developing structures and strategies that helped my clients get results even faster. And they've had tremendous success when they put my strategies into action. Here's a sampling of who I've worked with just in the past couple of months. A vice president of strategic partnerships for a national nonprofit, a rocket scientist, literally, she was a space engineer for NASA, a director of business development for a restaurant chain, a director of marketing for a global software corporation, and a regional director of human resources for a hotel chain. Now, all of these people came to me wanting to make a change, whether it was in the kind of work they did, who they did it with, or where they did it. And what all of them have found within days of using the strategies I'm about to outline for you is that they have more clarity and confidence about the direction their careers are headed in. And not long after that, the offers and opportunities start to roll in. It happens all the time. So let me tell you a little bit about how I discovered the strategies I now believe are critical to achieving career happiness. A long time ago, just a few years out of college, I realized that I was pretty good at getting jobs I wanted. As you saw, I had no problem changing professions when I felt like it. When I got bored, I moved on. That's not to say that it was easy, just that it was something I figured out how to do. But what this meant was that each time I felt the itch to move on, I was back in the same place of wondering what I really wanted to do. In other words, even though I was good at getting jobs, my career was made out of straw. I kept thinking that if I just moved around enough, I would eventually figure out what I wanted to do. But by my mid-30s, I finally realized that simply going from one interesting job to another was the same as throwing a bunch of stuff on the wall to see what would stick. So what hit me was how important it was to start with myself rather than what was out there. Getting clear on what career happiness looks like to you is the first thing you have to do if you want to achieve it. And you do that by figuring out your ideal cultural fit. One of the most important things I discovered when I stopped thinking in terms of my next job and set about creating a solid and fulfilling career was how essential it is to prioritize cultural fit. And now this seems so obvious to me that I'm surprised how few people talk about it, including the so-called experts. Because a lot of the advice I see on Twitter and career blogs talks about how a great career equals earning more money, or the right title or advancement, or working for an organization with a great mission. And I've had clients who started out thinking this way too. If only I had a bigger salary, or if only I could move up, or if only I worked for a company I really admired, that would equal career happiness. I've thought that too. But believe me, it doesn't. Over and over again with clients, friends, and with myself, I've seen that cultural fit is by far the biggest indicator of happiness or unhappiness at work. But fit can be easy to ignore when everything else is going the way you think it should be. This was the case with me when I made the transition in my early 30s from a small nonprofit to a position with operations oversight at a much larger organization. For the first time in my working life, I began to feel kind of set. Up until then, I'd been feeling my way, but now I could see a clear path moving forward, and I liked what I saw. I envisioned myself continuing to get more and more responsibility and working my way steadily up the ladder. Eventually, I would either be a senior VP at a large organization where I worked or an executive director at a small one. And I just keep moving up from there. Things would just keep getting bigger and better. Now, unfortunately, this vision of happy upward progression in my chosen path didn't last for more than a couple of years. Here's what happened. I was thrilled with the way my career looked on paper. I was working for a very prestigious organization whose mission I was really committed to. This place routinely made the list of Fortune magazine's 100 best places to work, and they put a big focus on developing their employees. To people who drank the Kool-Aid, they seemed almost to guarantee a life of steady and fulfilling work. So what was wrong? Well, for one, I never felt like I fit in. And this was easy to overlook in the beginning because I was so happy to be there and so eager to please. I was doing well in my role, my boss thought I was a superstar, and I was learning a lot. But after a while, I started noticing what felt like a chafing feeling, like the back of my shoe was rubbing against my heel. It was really hard for me to describe, so I didn't even try. And as the honeymoon period wore off, I just kept trying to be better, to continue being the person my boss wanted me to be and to model the behavior of people who were successful in the organization. If someone had asked me what it was that felt wrong, I couldn't have put my finger on it. I just thought I needed to keep improving myself and then the chafing would stop. But it didn't. And I just became more and more miserable, and that's because I was not a good fit with the culture of the place. So let's talk for a minute about exactly what I mean by culture. My favorite definition of culture is the way we do things around here. That's it. Whatever a company espouses in the way of values or operating principles doesn't matter when it comes to what it's actually like to work there. The only thing that matters is what happens. How people talk to each other or don't, how decisions get made, how meetings are run, the sense of humor or lack thereof, and how you actually spend your days. So here's a question for you all. Think of an organization you've been a part of. It can be a company, a department, a religious institution, or a social group where you felt like everyone else was clapping to a certain beat and your claps were always slightly off. No matter how hard you tried, you just couldn't keep time with everyone else. What you probably just thought of is an example of bad cultural fit. And chances are, when you were in that situation, you thought that you were the problem. That's exactly what happened to me in the situation I just described. Even though I believed 100% in the mission of what the organization was trying to accomplish, I realized three things. One, the institution and I had completely different personalities. Two, there was a code for interaction that I was never able to crack. And three, I really didn't like how I was spending my days, even if I liked the results that I was getting. So to help you think about this with your own careers, I've come up with three aspects of fit: feeling, interactions, and tasks. By feeling, I'm talking about the overall environment of the workplace, from the way it looks to the way it sounds. In other words, the general vibe you get. Interactions are just that, how people interact and who you're interacting with. And by tasks, I mean the bulk of how you spend the day. This is very different from a job description with a list of responsibilities. I'm talking about what you actually do all day. How are you expected to accomplish what you're supposed to? Now, at this point, I want to offer a quick disclaimer to explain why I am not focusing on finding your passion the way a lot of career advice does. The main reason is that the concept of passion is incredibly abstract. We all have lots of passions, and they change over time. But just because we're passionate about something doesn't mean we would like the day-to-day of doing it for a living. For instance, I've been very passionate about politics most of my life. But when it was actually my job, the day-to-day of writing press releases, attending community events, and organizing leaflet drops got old after about a year. The fact is, your passion isn't going to lead to happiness if you hate how you're actually spending your time. So that's why I focus on the specifics of cultural fit. You probably know yourself well enough to know what your passions are, but fit is more elusive. So why is fit so essential to creating a fulfilling career? Because if you don't pay attention to it and you choose positions that aren't a good fit, you'll end up bringing less and less of yourself to work as the months and years go by. And what happens when you do this over time is that work begins to feel like an act. You may not even notice that you're doing it, but you start calculating all of your responses and interactions, wondering how they will land. You don't ever feel fully yourself, which means that most of the time you feel ill at ease, even if you think you're doing a good job hiding it so no one notices. But here's the thing, they do notice it. When you're less than your full self, people pick up on it. And if your colleagues sense that you're not being authentic, they begin to lose trust that you're being honest around them, because you know what? You're not. Now, most of this happens under the surface, so your colleagues may not even realize it, much less talk about it. But just because no one's talking about how things feel off doesn't mean there won't be consequences. In my own situation I just described, I wanted nothing more than to be valued by the organization. Of course I wanted to fit in, even as I chafed. I wanted the higher-ups to think I was great. But even though I was lauded for my accomplishments and got promoted once, I knew that I would never get as far as some of my peers. And I couldn't pinpoint why, and it's certainly not something any of my managers talked about, but I knew it. And the longer I stayed, the more my confidence eroded. If you're not a fit with an organization's culture, you're not going to thrive there, no matter how impressive your accomplishments. And if you keep choosing positions that aren't a fit, even if they look great on paper, then being authentic and confident at work is going to become a distant memory for you. And you're going to become less and less attractive to yourself and others. But if you pay attention to the mismatch and take action quickly to find a great fit for yourself, then your confidence will return and great things can follow from there. Getting really clear about the fit you want for your next step, the environment, people, and tasks that bring out the best in you, makes up the first phase of successful career transitions, what I call the discovery phase. Here are some questions to ask yourself to start getting clear on the fit you're looking for. When have you felt most alive at work? What were you doing? Who are the colleagues who have brought out the best in you? And what kind of environments have allowed you to be your most productive? In addition to asking yourself these kinds of questions, it's also important in the discovery phase to reach out to friends, colleagues, and former colleagues who know you well. If you're talking to a colleague or former colleague, one of my favorite questions to ask is, when have you seen me shine? Taking a good look at your preferences and having the right kinds of conversations in this stage will give you a solid understanding of what you're looking for in terms of feeling, interactions, and tasks. But as I said before, most people don't actually start with themselves when they're ready to make a career change. Instead, they start looking at job postings to see what's out there. And I want to explain why I think that's such a bad idea and why it's so critical to start by getting really clear on what's important to you in terms of cultural fit, rather than starting by looking at open positions. One pitfall with scouring job boards is that the vast majority of these positions aren't even open, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But the biggest problem is that if you don't have a deep understanding of what motivates you at work, you'll be able to talk yourself into almost anything. Believe me, I've done it myself, and I've seen countless others do it. You see a job description and think, I could do that, and then no matter how little you know about it or how wrong it might be, you start trying to fit yourself into it the way Cinderella's stepsisters tried to fit themselves into the glass slipper. Also, like them, you start planning the wedding to this new job, imagining that you'll live happily ever after. But too often, the result is that what you hoped would make you happy ends up making you unhappy, or worse, feeling like a failure for making the wrong decision. So back to the straw and bricks metaphor, if you know yourself well, your decisions will be solid and you're much less likely to find yourself getting knocked over. So the goal of the discovery is to gain a deep understanding of your ideal cultural fit so that you know what to look for as you start to network. So let's talk about the second step in the process, which is to explore your options through conversations with other people. Now, anyone who's tried to network before knowing exactly what you want to do knows that the hard part is answering the question, what do you want to do? Because you know that's the first thing people will ask. And if you don't have a good answer, you can feel like a real flake. People expect you to have a specific position, organization, or sector in mind before you talk to them. But if that's exactly what you're trying to figure out by talking to them in the first place, this question can feel like a catch-22. More times than I care to admit, when I was in the early stages of a career transition, someone would ask me what I wanted to do, and I would answer, I don't know, something interesting? So that's one thing I'm going to teach you, how to answer that question in a way that allows you to explore a variety of possibilities. Later on, I'm also going to teach you how to conduct these conversations effectively. But before we jump in, I do want to take a minute to explain why I think it's so important to explore a wide variety of options rather than zeroing in on a position, organization, or sector too soon. One reason is that if you put all your eggs in one basket and something goes wrong, you're screwed. I've seen people do this, whether it's counting on a promotion that doesn't happen or assuming that a certain position will make them happy only to find that they hate it. And the second reason is that if you're too rigid about where you're headed, you may ignore opportunities that would be a really great fit for you. But if you focus on the fit you're looking for, the feeling, interactions, and tasks that you know will motivate you to do your best work, then you have a whole world of opportunities to explore. And you may discover, to your surprise, that if the fit is right, the sector doesn't matter. And if the fit is wrong, no amount of admiration for an organization or its mission will make it right. So now let's talk about how to respond when people ask you what you want to do. The key is to craft a response that reflects the fit you're looking for. After you've gotten very clear on your ideal fit, the kinds of feelings, interactions, and tasks that motivate you to do your best work, write a statement that sums up your career to date and what you're looking for in the next step. I have my clients use the following templates. After several years of doing whatever you've been doing, and in this section it's important to highlight your accomplishments and what you've learned, I'm now exploring opportunities that will allow me to do whatever you do best. Be specific here about the tasks, people, and environment that comprise your fit. So that's the framework for putting one of these statements together. Here's an example from a client of mine named Kim. After spending 3 years in investment banking, followed by 4 years building out a project finance team within a solar energy company, I decided to pursue my interest in entrepreneurship within the food and hospitality industries. Now that I've spent a couple of years working in startup environments, building new businesses, I'm exploring roles that will allow me to wear my financial, project management, and business development hats to contribute to the growth of an organization. Notice how Kim is very specific about the job function without going into detail about the position, organization, or sector she's looking for. And this was what allowed her to find her perfect and unexpected next step. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how to have effective conversations at this stage. When you're exploring options, it's important to have the mindset of a traveler. You're having open-ended conversations with people to learn about where they work, what their friends are doing, and who you should talk to next, based on the fit you're looking for. And this is a great stage at which to expand your network, and it's easy to do because it's relatively low stakes. After all, you're not asking people if they know about open positions. All you're doing is asking people to talk about themselves, which most people are happy to do. And I want to say again how important it is that you not ask people if they know of any open positions. At this point, you are simply exploring what's out there. Now, I want to take a minute to talk about what I mean by networking. That's one of those words that gets thrown around so much that it's hard to know what it means anymore. Some people think it means inviting people to connect on LinkedIn. Some people think it means attending professional events and mingling in a room full of strangers. My definition of networking doesn't include either of those things, although I think both can be useful for introducing yourselves to the right people. My definition of networking is this: having work-focused conversations with the intention to learn. Let me say that again: having work-focused conversations with the intention to learn. Later on, I'll go into the specifics of how to hold effective networking conversations at each stage of your transition. As I said before, the goal of discovery is to create a framework for exploring your options. The goal of exploration is to learn about a wide variety of things you might do and assess them according to your fit. Which leads us to the next stage, which is choosing a direction instead of a final destination. Why do I think it's so important to choose a direction you'll head next rather than an ultimate lifelong career goal? Because simply put, there's no holy grail of career happiness. The myth of the Holy Grail says that if we just dig deep enough within ourselves, we'll find our one true career love. And that once we find it, we don't have to look any further. Well, that just isn't the case. Too many things can and will change before you're ready to retire. So that's why I believe so strongly that we should all give up trying to find our ultimate destination and instead focus on taking the best next step. Now, this doesn't mean that I am advocating that you zigzag randomly from job to job. I believe strongly that each direction you pursue should be intentional and enjoyable, and a building block for the future. I call the kind of networking that you do at this stage targeted networking. This is where your questions become more focused. You want to find people who do what you want to do or who hire for what you want to do and learn what managers look for in candidates. I said this before and I'll say it again. Never say, "I'm wondering if there are any open positions." I've been on the other side of those conversations and they're always extremely awkward. If I don't know the person, it makes them seem pushy and turns me off. And if I do know the person and know that they wouldn't be a good fit, then it's just plain awkward and kind of sad. So if there is an organization you think might be a good fit and you haven't connected with anyone there, then use your network to find someone to talk to. And when you get them on the phone, use your "what do you want to do" statement to introduce yourself, explain why you think the organization is great, and then say you're interested in learning more about it. Believe me, if the chemistry is right and the other person on the phone thinks you may be a good fit to work there, you won't have to ask about open positions. Now, I want to go back to something I mentioned earlier, and that is the danger of spending too much time looking at online job postings. The instinct to do this is strong, because after all, if you're not looking at job postings, how will you know you're not missing something? But here's the thing, the vast majority of positions are not filled through listings. People tell me all the time how bad the economy is and how no one's hiring, and my response is, "Oh, they're hiring all right, they're just not advertising." According to the research out there, roughly 80% of positions are filled through what's called the hidden job market. That means that these positions are never even posted. And that's because most companies don't need to advertise. By the time they need to fill a position, they usually have an extensive pipeline of excellent candidates, either from referrals or from within the organization itself. And what's more, many of the positions you do see listed aren't actually open. I call these phantom listings. So why would a company post a position that's already filled or non-existent? Well, for a couple of reasons. Often, even when a company knows exactly who they want to hire, they advertise the position just to cover themselves and comply with regulations. Or they may post a position just to keep a budget line open, even when they have no intention of filling it. I've worked at many places where both instances were common practice. So that means that if you think you're going to find your next role by applying for positions you find online, you've already missed the boat, because you're either not seeing positions that are hidden from you, or you're pursuing phantom listings guaranteed to lead nowhere. What this means is that you have to flip your thinking. You have to stop pursuing positions and become the one pursued. And in order to do that, you need to be talking to organizations before they're ready to hire someone. Now, this may seem unfair, but it's not at all surprising. Think about it from their point of view. If you needed to find someone to take care of your child, which would you rather do? Go through the trouble of posting the job online and screening a bunch of strangers, or hire the wonderful babysitter you met when you picked your kid up from the play date? You'd probably rather do the latter, right? Are companies missing out on fantastic candidates like yourself? Sure. Might this practice be considered unfair? Absolutely. But here's another way I want you to shift your thinking so that you don't feel like you're at a huge disadvantage if you don't have a huge network right now. Don't think of connections as simply people you've known for a long time, went to school with, or worked with. Your network isn't a limited fixed group of people. On the contrary, you should think of your network as something you are always building and expanding. And I want to give you a quick snapshot of how quickly it's possible to build your network exponentially. Several years ago, when my husband and I were first considering moving from New York to LA, I went on a networking binge. I wanted to understand what the Southern California landscape was like for my field of coaching and consulting. I began by talking to people I knew, and I ended each conversation with, who else should I be talking to? And you're looking at what happened. This is a diagram I made to track my conversations from that 5-week period. As you can see, I talked to 28 people, 24 of whom were total strangers before we spoke. You can bet that none of them were strangers by the time we hung up the phone. And as you can see, the majority introduced me to other people I didn't yet know but soon would. And when I explain this process to people, they don't really believe it can happen for them until they try it, and then they're amazed at the upward spiral. Over and over again, I see the same momentum happening with my clients. Having 20-minute conversations with strangers becomes an integral part of their work week, and they all say the same thing. I can't believe how helpful everyone is. The positive feedback they get from these conversations changes their outlook, and they get their mojo back. And of course, they hear about opportunities way before organizations are officially hiring for them. So when people ask me how my clients build careers they love, the answer is simple. I help them hold effective conversations. And with all my clients, the story is the same. They didn't know a position existed until the person they were talking to mentioned it and then told them that they might be a good fit. Then the person asked for a resume, and the conversations continued from there. So now I'd like to talk about the specifics of holding these conversations. First, I'll give an overview, and then I'll go into more depth. The first thing you need to do to make sure these conversations go well is reach out to the right people at the right stage. The second thing you need to do is set a clear intention, because there's nothing more frustrating for either person than not knowing why they're talking to each other in the first place. The third thing you need to do is send the kind of email that will get the person on the phone. And the fourth thing you need to do is know what you're going to say once you're on the phone. Okay, so the first question, who do you talk to when? One thing I've noticed again and again is that as soon as you let it be known that you're thinking about a career change, everyone and his brother wants to give you advice. Oh, you should do this, or have you thought about doing this? Now, almost everyone who offers advice means well, but make no mistake, advice can be deadly when you're in the early stages of figuring out what you want to do. Too many opinions will only have the effect of leaving you more confused than ever. So that's why you want to avoid advice. Now, the people that you want to reach out to at first are people who are good listeners and creative thinkers. You also want to talk to people who have your best interests at heart, but I do want to caution you about talking to close family because they often have an agenda for us. In these early conversations, you're going to be practicing your what do you want to do statement to see how it lands. Does it make sense to them? Given what they know of you, would they tweak it in any way? Once you've had between 5 and 10 of these early conversations, then you can start reaching out to people whose work seems interesting. Go through your LinkedIn connections and your Facebook friends and get a list of people whose work you'd like to know more about. Or think of people who might know people who are doing work you'd like to learn more about. Once you have a pretty good idea of the direction you want to pursue, you can reach out to people who might be in a position to hire you, but you want to make sure that you're ready before you talk to them. No matter who you're reaching out to, you want to be very clear on what you hope to get out of the conversation. I can't stress enough the importance of having a clear intention and letting the other person know what it is. Here are some reasons you might offer for why you want to talk to someone. I'd like to bounce some ideas off of you. In these conversations, you'll share your what do you want to do statement and get their reactions. I'd like to learn more about your work. Here, you really just want to interview people and hear about a wide variety of positions and companies that are out there. I'd like to tell you what I'm up to and get your thoughts about people on X industry that I might reach out to. Some people are what Malcolm Gladwell calls connectors. Even if they don't have information for you, they probably know people who do. I'd like to get your thoughts on how someone with my skills and experience might fit in your organization or industry. These conversations are for when you know which direction you want to head in. Okay, so once you're clear about why you want to talk to someone, the best way to set it up is to email the person, explain your intention, ask for a 20-minute phone call, and include a short sentence about yourself. Save your what do you want to do statement for the actual conversation. Asking for 20 minutes on the phone makes it clear that you respect their time, and it also increases the likelihood of getting a response. If they're happy to chat longer than 20 minutes, that's great. But if the two of you don't hit it off, then it provides an easy out for both of you. It's like speed dating. Here's an email that a client of mine used. So-and-so suggested I reach out to you to see if you'd be willing to schedule a 20-minute phone call so I could learn more about your organization and what you do. After many successful years in advertising, I'm currently exploring opportunities that will allow me to use my creative and relationship building skills to contribute to the growth and improvement of an organization. Please let me know if you have time for a call in the next couple of weeks. Okay, so once you get them on the phone, what do you say? Now, keep in mind that when you reach out to someone for their help, it's your job to lead the conversation. And if you follow these 5 steps, you can avoid almost all awkwardness. 1, ask if it is still a good time to talk. 2, thank them for taking the time. 3, state your intention. 4, tell them what you want to do. Use your statement. And 5, ask your first question. The conversation should flow from there. I want to take a minute here to talk about a rabbit hole that I see a lot of people going down, and that is thinking that you have to perfect your resume before you start talking to people. First of all, you're never going to perfect your resume. But most important, while your resume needs to be good, you should never lead with it. Talk to people first, see if you hit it off, and then let them ask for it. Now, of course, it should back up the good impression they have of you, but that's what it is. It's backup. Be honest. How many people do you know who applied for a job where they didn't know anyone, sent in their resume, got called in for an interview, and landed the job? Not many, right? So don't sweat your resume at first. Start talking to people, and then when they ask for it, you can get it into shape. As I said before, the goal of discovery is to create a framework for exploring your options. The goal of exploration is to learn about a wide variety of things you might do and assess them according to your ideal fit. And the goal of targeted networking is to land your dream job. By now, we've come full circle to thinking about your next step. Okay, so let's say you network right and land your dream job, one that's a great cultural fit and where you'll be allowed to do your best work every day. Can you relax because you know you'll live happily ever after in work bliss? Well, no. One reason is that the world will change. If one thing has become obvious in the last 20 years, it's that nothing lasts forever. When I was in college, writing for a print newspaper seemed like a steady, exciting career, and we all know how that turned out. And there are smaller ways the ground can shift beneath your feet. A company can reorganize and suddenly your job isn't so much fun anymore. A beloved boss can get a better job offer or get booted out. Your colleagues that made the fit such a perfect one may move on to other things. And then, of course, there's your own growth or lack of it. If you're a curious person, then you need new challenges to keep you interested. And the fact is, you just can't depend on one position or organization to provide enough change and continuous intellectual challenge for you to be happy forever. I've seen people fall into this trap, including myself, and it isn't pretty. The trap of thinking it's an organization's job to keep you happy and challenged because, well, just because you work there. I've heard plenty of people say things like, But I got my master's. I think the organization should find me a position that matches my new skills. No, they shouldn't. That's your job. You can't rely on your boss to manage your career, and you can't treat the organization you work for as a parent whose job it is to take care of you. If you want to keep growing, then you may need to leave. It's that simple. And in addition to thinking an organization should take care of you, another trap is when an organization sees you as indispensable. Wait, how could that be a trap? Isn't that a good thing? Well, I certainly read a lot of advice about how to make yourself indispensable at work, only I think it's a terrible idea. Being seen as indispensable can result in stagnation. The organization is committed to keeping you exactly where you are because no one else can do what you do. Scarier words have never been spoken, at least if you want to grow and progress. And this seems to be a theme with a lot of people I talk to. One person I spoke with managed a certain type of insurance claim in a hospital. This was highly technical, specialized work, and no one knew more about it than he did. The only problem was that he was bored out of his skull. He worked his way up from administrative assistant to manager, and when I asked him why he kept accepting these promotions, he said, "Oh, they're easy wins." Yeah, they were easy wins. It kept him from thinking about the bigger picture of what he actually wanted to do with his life. And it's not like being promoted to manager of this type of insurance claim was leading anywhere more exciting. Quite the opposite. The longer he stayed in that role, the more he was narrowing his options for the future. Being valued like that is seductive, but it's also dangerous. If your boss values you exactly where you are, it's because you're fulfilling their needs. And those needs don't always align with your own. With clients, friends, and with myself, I've seen over and over again how important it is to keep an eye on the next step, no matter how wonderful a job seems at first. If you don't, you run the risk of either being stranded when things turn sideways, or worse, being one of those former shining stars who outwears her welcome. I've been in that situation and kicked myself for not leaving on a high instead of a low. Now, I've been lucky to have had a few jobs I would describe as dream jobs. The thing is, none of them stayed dream jobs, and that is perfectly normal. Even with my most recent salary position as consultant and coach, which I loved longer than any other job I'd had before, I started to see the writing on the wall when I accepted a promotion that put me in charge of a project I really didn't enjoy. I knew I was coming dangerously close to making myself indispensable for the work I didn't like. Now, fortunately, I had learned my lesson about keeping one eye out the door, which meant that as soon as I'd accepted the job several years earlier, I began thinking, where might this lead? And what do I need to do to make sure that I have the freedom to continue doing what I love when the time comes to move on? From the start, I was preparing to leave. Now, this may sound cynical, like a newlywed who professes to be in love, only to immediately start scanning the horizon for better prospects. But employment isn't marriage. It's not supposed to last in this day and age. So that's why what I'm recommending is serial monogamy. Commit to the present and keep your eye on the future. In many ways, step 4, thinking about where you're going next, isn't really a step on the path to career happiness so much as a mindset. A continuous practice of discovery, exploration, and targeting will help keep you engaged in both your present and your future, and it will also ensure that you don't get too complacent. There's an old saying that luck happens when preparation meets opportunity, and that's what this approach is about. When you know yourself well and build solid relationships, in other words, if you build your career out of bricks, the right opportunities will come your way over and over again. As one client said to me, if I keep doing this, I'll never have to look for another job again. All right, so what do you do now? Well, you have a choice. You can decide that you're on this webinar for a reason and commit to taking action. Or you can ponder everything I've said and do nothing. And before you decide how long you're going to wait to make a change, I want to ask you this. What is it costing you to stay where you are? By this, I mean, if you dread going to work every day, what impact is that having on your health, your sleep, your relationships, your sense of self-worth? And how long are you willing to live like this? So again, it's your choice. You can absolutely stay where you are and let things happen as they will. Or you can decide to take charge of your career, which means being intentional about what you do and making your own decisions about your future instead of letting others make them for you. It's up to you. If you want to see if my approach would work in your situation, then we should talk. I've set aside some time next week, and I would be happy to jump on the phone with you if you're serious about making a change, but only if you're serious. I'll be setting up these calls on a first-come, first-served basis, so if you want to talk, get over to anagrahamhunter.com/free session and answer a few questions. And that is it for my presentation, and now I am ready to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was great, and phenomenal time management, getting in right at 12:45. We have 15 minutes more for questions here, and we do have a lot coming in from our listeners. So I'd like to go ahead and just jump right in. So the first, we have several questions specifically about age. So how old is too old to consider a career change? And then there are some other specific considerations within that. So is it worth it taking a pay cut at 55 in order to have greater longevity? Is it worth it to go back to school for 4 more years to get the credentials that you need? What are your thoughts on career change at 55 or over?
So maybe not surprisingly, I don't ever think it's too old to make a career change. I have worked with clients in their 50s, and they've had tremendous success making career changes. And right now I'm working with a client who's actually in her early 60s, and she is getting very good feedback from people in the sector that she is hoping to move into. So I don't think it's ever too old. To answer some of the specifics, the first one was about pay cut. That is totally up to you. So I think that a couple of things. You need to calculate, is it possible that this pay cut might actually in the long term result in more salary, which is the case when I took a pay cut several years ago. I was unhappy where I was, but I was making a ton of money. And there was a new position that I knew I was going to love, but it meant a pay cut. And that was a big blow to my ego, but I did it. And then I out-earned what I would have been making at the other place. I believe that happy people make more money. I've seen studies that back that up. So, it depends on how much of a pay cut and if you can still live the way you want to. Yeah, I think the question is, is it going to make you happy, and is that happiness worth it even if you don't make up the money? And then 2, is there a possibility that you might make up the money? The second question was about going back to school. I will admit that even though I have 2 master's degrees, I am biased against quitting work and getting a graduate degree. And I'll say, I got both of my masters while I was working full time. I've seen too many people think that going back to school is going to solve their problems. Either it's going to help them discover what they want to do, which it almost never does, or 2, it's going to, give them this magic credential that just means the job offers are going to start coming in. And again, that doesn't often happen. At least, with an MBA, what I've seen and what I've read is that the biggest determining factor on the kind of success people have after they finish their MBA is what they were doing before they quit work to get their MBA. It's actually the experience that they went into school having. But I would say that the decision as to whether or not you want to go to school, follow the process I just outlined. Really get clear on what it is that you want in terms of happiness, and explore different ways of getting there. And you want to make sure that you talk to graduates of whatever program you're considering to see what work they've found. But don't expect it to be a cure-all, because you can end up going into a hell of a lot of debt and being just as lost, and also having been out of the workforce for 3 or 4 years. So.
Thanks, Anna. So kind of as an extension to that, another listener asks, what do you do if you do know what you want to do, but aren't sure you can do it in terms of your skills and experience? And so do you want to just touch on how people can identify where they can build skills? Yeah.
So a couple of things. I think that, and this what I'm about to say goes for your resume, goes for skill building, everything. Talk to the people who are doing what it is that you want to do, either people at the peer level or people who could hire you, and ask them. That's what I did when I made a very radical shift from operations management to management consulting and coaching. And people just thought I was crazy to want to do that. But I just asked them, well, what skills do you look for? And then I figured out how I could build them. So get it from the experts. Don't take anyone else's advice about the skills you actually need. You might be surprised about what you hear. And then you can try to, gain those skills in a number of ways. For me, this was when I was getting my second master's. I volunteered for some professors to lead focus groups. I was a volunteer for some consulting corporations, assisted in the work that they were doing, and I also looked for opportunities in my own work to build those skills. So I think it is possible to build those skills, but before you jump in, definitely make sure that you're headed in the right direction, because people will tell you, and you can ask that question, what kinds of skills and experience do you look for in this position? And the other question, the flip side, is how do you see someone with my skills and experience fitting in with this position or organization?
Great points. Thank you. So another really good question here. This listener had an exploratory conversation with a contact who gave her a few leads, and one of which was to contact a professional recruiter that she knows. What is your opinion on working with a professional recruiter?
All right, so I'm going to share a very strong bias I have. And honestly, this is not a bias I had until I started hearing horror stories from my clients. Recruiters have no imagination. And that sounds like an insult, but actually it's their job description not to have any imagination. They want to check boxes. They have positions they need to fill, and they tend to look for people who are doing exactly what it is that they want someone to do in a different organization. So they want to take you from the box that you're in and put you in the same box in a slightly different setting. If you want to make a change, then I think recruiters are useless. But if you want to do exactly what you're doing now in a different organization, then I think that they could be useful. But I've seen people waste a hell of a lot of time working with recruiters, because sometimes they're just sort of like, not mean bullies, but they're just like, send me your resume, send me your salary requirements. And it's like it all moves sort of way too fast, and before you even know if this position is something you want to apply to, you're spending hours putting together the application. So just, if you're in the early stages, no, don't do it.
Okay, great points again. So this question is a bit about how you talk about yourself and your change. So this listener said that she studied one topic in undergraduate, dabbled in several industries upon graduation, and is now in grad school for a master's degree in a completely different arena. And prospective employers are asking her to explain the leap from one career interest to another. How should she respond without explaining the whole lengthy trajectory?
A woman after my own heart, or man. I've been in that situation. So the first thing is, you definitely need to come up with a seamless story, and you do not need to explain the whole trajectory. But for each change that you've made, each turn your career has taken, you need to come up with one compelling reason why you chose to do what you did. So think about those major decisions you made, and it sounds like there are only maybe 3 or 4, and come up with a reason. And I will say, people appreciate growth. They appreciate people who are hungry to experience new things. I've had clients who are very worried about their resume. Oh my God, I look like a flake. Oh my God, I should just skip that part. It's like, no, they want you because of who you are. And, like my one client, if she'd stayed in investment banking for 10 years, they wouldn't have wanted her. So you need to own your story. And I won't spend too much time on this, but I finally mastered my own story after zigzagging all over the place. And what did I think I said, after spending my 20s as a classroom teacher, I realized that I wanted to affect change on a larger scale, which led me to government and politics. And after a few years learning how policy and funding works, I transferred those skills into the nonprofit arena. And then that was for one of my changes. And then the other one, I said, after years of being an externally focused person, I realized that I became more and more fascinated with the internal workings of organizations, and really wanted to help them become healthy from the inside. That was the transition statement I used when I wanted to go into management consulting and coaching. So just, there is a core reason. It's a good one, and you need to own it and then practice that succinct story.
Thank you, Anna. We have a couple questions coming in now about what are some ways to help think about determining fit, and how can you narrow down your interests if you have quite a few?
Okay. So I think that at the beginning stages, you actually should not narrow down your interests. I worked with one guy who was a mortgage broker. He was totally miserable. And he was like, I want to open a local deli, or I want to go into the contracting business. I mean, really, he was thinking so far and wide. I was like, great, you need to find people in those industries to interview. And he did. He interviewed 4 deli owners and a couple of food vendors to learn about that business. He talked to some people he knew who were in the contracting business, and he really went far and wide. And he was very clear on what his fit was. Like, okay, how do I like to spend my days? What's the level of interaction I want? How much independent work do I want? What kind of environment? All that stuff. So he could evaluate, as he interviewed all those people, he could evaluate, well, okay, what would it be like to run a deli? Would that really fit? As much as I romanticize it, would that really fit with what I want to do? And what he turned out doing was becoming a mortgage broker at a very different organization that was a perfect cultural fit for him. And he's very happy there. But I think that you really need to talk to people in all of those things that you are considering doing, because that's the only way you're going to know that they might be or that they're definitely not a good fit for you. So go far and wide. And what I tell my clients is that a path will emerge. It may seem unbelievably messy and scary, but believe me, a path will emerge. But you have to talk to other people. You're not going to do it just sitting inside your head doing internet research.
So we have about 4 more minutes, and we're going to try to squeeze in about 3 more questions if we can, Anna.
All right, I will try to be succinct.
So 2 of the questions are about networking for folks who are introverted. So the first is, how do you network if you're fundamentally introverted, which we certainly hear a lot about in our career center. And also, what if, kind of a spin-off of this, what if your strengths don't lie in communication but execution? Networking is a challenge to people who don't identify as connectors and find it trying to seed multiple relationships.
Wait, what's the second question again?
What do you do if your strengths don't lie in communication but execution, as networking is a challenge for people who don't identify themselves as connectors?
Oh yeah, I'm not much of a connector, and I'm pretty introverted, and so avoid networking events. Don't ever tell yourself you have to work a room, because it'll sap your energy and make you miserable, and those things are rarely worth going to. So the way I just explained doing it, it's great. You send out emails to individuals, and then you talk to them on the phone one-on-one. And any introvert can have a conversation with someone one-on-one. You do not need to be an extrovert to do that. It is intimate, it's quiet, it's focused. That doesn't mean that it won't be awkward. That's fine. Of course, some will be awkward, but some will be great. As for the person who doesn't, who sees himself more as a someone who executes rather than communicates, follow the script I gave. Honestly, if you come up with good questions and you follow those 5 steps for what to say when you get on the phone, it's going to be okay. Like, you can do this. I have the most awkward introverted clients. Just get on a roll. You just need practice.
Okay, great. Thank you. So one other question is, could you address in more detail how to come up with your what do you want to do statement?
Well, no. I mean, that's really tricky. I think, this is something that I actually spend a lot of time working on with my clients, and they have done extensive work to come up with their ideal fit, and then they draft the statement, and then I help them revise it. So it is an in-depth process, but I think coming up with what you've done and what you've accomplished, that's a fairly easy part to do. Coming up with what you're looking for, that can be tricky. But I think that you just really need to focus on focus on job function, and that will help you get there. But you just don't want to limit yourself. So, you know, if you see yourself as a project planner or someone who's a great relationship builder or, you know, communications expert, all of those things, all of those broad skills you can put into the second part of the what do you want to do statement, because those things can all fit in a wide variety of sectors and organizations.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Anna. We are at time here, and so I really would love to just give a couple additional announcements about what's happening here at Brandeis. So, folks, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. This was a jam-packed hour, and I hope this was a really great starting point for all of you who are considering a career change. Please let us know how we did by filling out our satisfaction survey. We do take your feedback to heart and make changes on each and every one of our webinars. For those of you who are Brandeis undergraduate alumni, you do get free career services for life through the Hiatt Career Center. So you'll be receiving a follow-up message with our information on scheduling a career counseling appointment, whether it's in-person, phone, or Skype, and you also have Anna's offer through the previous link. I'd also like to invite you to attend our next webinar. We host them monthly, and the next webinar will be with me. I'll be presenting on LinkedIn and how to build your profile so that when you do start reaching out to contacts and scheduling these discovery conversations, they can have a bit of a baseline about you. And so that will be on Tuesday, February 24th, and here is the link to register. If you could just flip to the last one, and then here's my contact information. Again, I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Career Programs and Engagement at Hiatt. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions about career services, getting involved with helping others, or what we do at Hiatt. I'd be happy to hear from you. We do have a LinkedIn group as well that I invite you all to join. So thank you again for joining us on behalf of Brandeis and the Hiatt Career Center. Thank you so much, Anna, as well. This was great, and I hope to see you all online at our next webinar.
All right, bye. Thanks, guys.